So in the last two videos, we learned how to make methods, the void methods that perform actions, and the methods that return values depending on the data type we declare it to return. Now when we did this, we didn't pass in any information into the method, we left the parameters empty and let the method work with what we gave it. And in this video, I'll teach you how you could pass in information to methods. And the reason we do this is so that we could give a method certain information, and the method with this information that we give it will be able to execute their code with, of course, the information that we gave it. So first of all, let's make a method that will add three numbers, and the three numbers that will be added will be dependent on what information we pass into the parameters of that method. On a side note, in Java, it is recommended to think from a top to bottom perspective, and that means we think of the most complex thing we have to do, the final product, and we build down from there towards the more simpler things. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is actually call the method, but we haven't made the method yet, so right now we can just name it whatever we want. So inside the main method, let's call the method that we have yet to create. And we could call it whatever we want, so let's just call it add three numbers. And for the time being, just empty parameters and close that statement off with a semicolon. Now, since we want this method to take in three numbers in the parameters, and it is going to add these three numbers to come to a final sum, let's type in three integer values and we separate them by using commas. So inside of the parameters, we're going to add in three different values because we're going to add three different numbers. So I might as well do 10, 5, and 3. So we passed in information into the parameters of this method. Now let's actually create the method so that it could actually use this information to do something. So you already know how to make a method, so just do that in accordance with the name you just gave it. So we created the skeleton of our method, and in order to determine what information the method will take in for its parameters, we have to declare the variables inside of the parameters of this method. So it would go as follows. We go into the parameters and we put in what information it wants to take. So in this case, it's going to take three integer values. So you know how to declare variables. You just type the data type, followed by the identifier. In this case, we're going to make it very literal. First number, and then we separate it by commas. Int second number, comma, int third number. So just recapping on what we did so far. Inside of the method parameters, we declared three variables so that whenever we call this method, it's going to ask for these three variables. And if you actually go up here into the main method and call this method just with empty parameters, you're going to get an error. And the reason for this error is that the method add three numbers is in the main type class is not applicable for the arguments, meaning that at the time being, the parameters which this method requires are not present. So if we actually type add arguments to match these requirements, it'll automatically put in some values just to get the method to work. So you may be asking, but you're probably not, Mike, we declare the variables, but they have no value. When will we initialize them? And that is the beauty of passing in information to methods. You don't need to initialize a variable inside of the actual method itself, and every time you use it, or whenever you want to call it. That is why I use the parameters. We give each variable a value when we pass in the information when we call it. To rephrase, the variables are initialized with the value we pass through the parameters when we call the method. So whenever you call this method and you type these variables, it automatically stores them as these variables. So the first number corresponds to the first number, the second number corresponds to the second number, and the third number corresponds to the third number. So we have our method, we declared our variables, and now we just need to do something with them. Since we want to add these three numbers, let's create a new variable inside of the method, then assign it the value of the sum of the three variables we passed in the information for. Then simply print it out to the console. So let's make our total variable, so int total. We declared it, now we have to initialize it, so total is assign the value of first number plus the value of second number plus the value of third number, and then close it off with a semicolon. And just to cap it off, we're going to have this method print out the value of the total into the console. Your total is, and then concatenate the total. And when we run this method, it looks for the main method, executes everything inside of that, executes the first method of add three numbers, which gives us the value of 18, and then executes the second add three numbers calling and gives us a value of 0. So now I'm just going to go over everything we did in this video. We made a method called add three numbers, and this method requires three integer values. So whenever you call this method, it requires 3 integer values as its parameters. And once it gets the information of the variables, it comes back and then sets the total equal to all these numbers added together. And then the method, just prints out the answer to the console. So let me make a few new methods to show how you could do this with other data types. Alright, so I just made 2 extra methods. This one is called display string and this one is called display float. So the display string asks for a parameter of type string, and then it uses the input that you give it to display this message saying my name is, plus the variable that you give it, name. So if I call this method display string with a parameter of Michael, it would say, let's just run this for fun, it would say my name is Michael. And the other method I made is called display float, and it requires a parameter of type float, just any number. So in display float, I enter in a value of type float. And don't forget to add that little f to reiterate to Java that this is in fact a float. So now you guys actually know how to pass in information into methods. So play around with that, make a few new methods. Just learn all of this. And in the next video, we're going to learn how to instantiate a class and make objects by doing so. So hope you guys enjoyed the video, hope you learned something. Till next time, peace.